The tribe of Danaoi, who settled in Tel Dan, by biblical DNA. Book of Genesis, chapter 49, verses 16 through 18. Dan doeth judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan is a serpent by the way, an adder by the path, which is biting the horses' heels, and its rider falleth backward. For thy salvation, Yeshua, I have waited, Yahweh. In order to understand who the tribe of Dan is, we had to understand exactly what they started off as. So step 1, forming one tribe out of 10 of the sea peoples with fellow Peleset/Philistines in the Aegean Sea traveling to Egypt. Step 2, losing battles with Egypt and becoming captured. Step 3, serve with Egypt in battles and becoming overlords in Canaan and given land by the Egyptians in Tel Laish, Canaan. This is the book from Nancy Saunders, The Sea Peoples, Warriors of the Ancient Mediterranean, Revised Edition. I've had this book since 2017, 16, something like that. So 2 years after she passed. While Israelites, Philistines, and Arameans were fighting for the old Canaanite strongholds, the evidence is easy to see in sacked cities, tumbled walls, broken communications, depopulation, and deprivation. The Dardani are a new name to history and of great interest, if, as is likely, they are the same as the Dardanoi, Homer's name for the people of Troy. They should in any case be located in northwestern Anatolia. This is just briefly talking about the Israelites. I figured people would like this. I'll probably bring it up when I actually do a video regarding Moab or Edom, or do a video of Hittites. Alright. The great barbarian invasion that swept down from the Danube to overrun Mycenae and many other cities, and even throwing probability to the winds, took ship to arrive on the borders of Egypt as those mysterious sea peoples who so terrified Ramses III. They bring large numbers of new people south for the Danube. Olive oil may have been exported to Egypt, where the olive does not grow easily, but of grain there is not likely to have been a surplus. Sesame and cumin, gold and purple dye, are known by their Semitic names. This could be found in the Knossos tablets. Alright, this is some pottery that's going to be brought up, what they found in Tel Dan to link with the Greeks or an Aegean Sea type of people. If foreign styles are reflected at all, it is the fine monochrome pottery of Bronze Age, Anatolia, and certain so-called Philistine pots. If shekels and shekelesh are in fact the same, they might have formed part of the larger confederation which, breaking up after its defeat by Mernafta, scattered over the East Mediterranean, a part being washed up on the coast of Sicily, where it joined with a revived native culture from southern Italy and inland Sicily. Yet others may have joined Ramses III's troops for his Libyan wars, This is of course highly speculative. After some lines of panegyric and bluster, the real situation is sketched. As for the foreign countries, they made a conspiracy in their islands. All at once the lands, i.e., the people, were on the move, scattered in war. No country could stand before their arms. Haiti, Code Kizwane, Arkamish, Arzawa, and Aloysia. They were cut off. A camp was set up in one place in Amaru. They desolated its people, and its land was like that which has never come into being. They were advancing on Egypt while the flame, perhaps the Egyptian navy or a reference to scorched earth tactics, was prepared before them. Their league was Peliset, Djeker, Shekelesh, Dinyan, and Weshesh. United lands, i.e., people. They laid their hands upon the lands to the very circuit of the earth, their hearts confident and trusting our plans will succeed. Then Pharaoh describes his preparations. I organized my frontier in Deja, probably in southern Palestine or between Egypt and Palestine. I prepared before them princes, commanders of garrisons, Mariano. I caused the river mouth, the Nile Delta, to be prepared like a strong wall, with warships, transports, and merchantmen. They were manned entirely from bow to stern, with brave fighting men and their weapons. The troops consisted of every picked man of Egypt. They were like lions roaring on mountain tops. This was certainly a great emergency, and all had to go to the defense of their native land. Their chariotry consisted of runners, of picked men, of every good and capable chariot fighter. And for those who reach my frontier, their seed is not. Their heart and their soul are finished forever. Okay. The aftermath of battle is the display of prisoners, and the reliefs show them in three lines being presented to the gods by Pharaoh. The upper line, according to the accompanying inscription, are leaders of every country. The middle line are the fallen ones of Dinyan, and the bottom are the fallen ones of Peliset. All wear the high crowns in identical kilts with tassels. Pharaoh boasts, my strong arm has overthrown those who came to exalt themselves, the Peliset, the Dinyan, and the Shekelesh. On the preceding relief, the Djeker wear the same dress and head crowns, so either we have to accept that Peliset, Dinyan, Shekelesh, and Djeker were virtually indistinguishable, or that the representations are symbolic. So at the top, that's what it's talking about. Words spoken by the fallen ones of Dinyan. Breathe thou, good ruler, great of strength like Mantu, in the midst of Thebes. The Papyrus Harris also contains a great boast of Ramses. I extended all the boundaries of Egypt. I overthrew those who invaded them from their lands. I slew the Dinyan who are in their isles. The Jeker and the Peliset were made ashes. We have just seen that identical headgear was worn by the Jeker and possibly the Dinyan and the Shekelesh as well. The crowns on the reliefs are not obviously made from feathers, whereas when feathers are worn by the Libyans, they are unquestionably shown as much. So I also have it highlighted. Their hair stiffened and held by a headband, clearly not feathers, is worn by Egyptian troops from southern Palestine fighting the Libyans. And here it says Celtic warriors used to stiffen their hair with lime. So these are the possible locations, the hypothesis of where the Peliset and the Danan or the Danube were located. In the land and sea battles of Ramses III, we find once more engaged the Shardana, probably but not certainly among the attackers, as well as being Egyptian auxiliaries, the Shekelesh and probably the Teresh. Then there are four new names: Tejeker, Dinyan, Peliset, and Weshesh. Although the Dinyan did not take part in Merneptah's war, they were already known in the Eastern Mediterranean about them in the Peliset. There will be more to say shortly. The Egyptians include the Dinyan among islanders from the north. In this, they almost certainly were not. Alright, the Dinyan. When the Egyptians recognized Dinyan among their adversaries, these were people they already knew something about. A land of Deona is referred to the Amarna correspondence in the early 14th century, where it is named immediately before the Ugarit, Kadesh, and Amaru. The list runs from north to south, so we may infer that wherever the land of Diana was, it was north of Ugarit and the Ornenses, but not too far distant. Alright, I also have down here whether the early home of the Dinyan had been in southwestern Anatolia or in the Hatay or in both. The shift to Karpti and Adana was not a great one, but parallels that of Hittite groups from a plateau to Carchemish and Sinjarili. If it was the Dinyan, or more probably some other northern contingent that joined with a part of the Dinyan, who overran the Luka lands and so were the immediate cause of the Hittite king's appeal to the king of Ugarit, then this would help to explain the absence of the Luka from among the attackers of 1186 BC. The Dinyan, who were making their first appearance in Egypt amongst the attackers of that year, could have taken their place. Before leaving the Dinyan, we must look at an intriguing twist to their story that is almost a continuation of the Mapasas legend, but based on completely separate premises. This is a bold suggestion that links the Dinyan Danaoi of Egyptian texts with the biblical tribe of Dan. When Deborah, Barak, and a combined force of Israelites defeated the Canaanite commander Jabin and his chariotry at Mount Tabor, sometime in the 13th or 12th century, as told in the book of Judges, the muster of the Israelite forces compressed Ephraim, Benjamin, and Issachar. But in the clan of Reuben there was searching of heart. Why did you tarry among the sheepfolds to hear the piping of the flocks? Gilead stayed away in the east, and Dan, why did he abide with the ships? Judges chapter 5:17. The puzzle has been how Dan should have come to the have ships at all, for none of the other Israelite tribes were seamen. So the obvious meaning that the Danites were a maritime people who were busy with their ships, just as the shepherds of Reuben were busy with their flocks, has been dismissed. In both instances, Deborah's call to war were refused because of the more profitable business. If Dan was not originally one of the tribes of Israel who crossed the Jordan from the east, then the text, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel, Genesis chapter 49:16, means strictly what it says. Formerly, Dan was not one of the tribes, but henceforth he is admitted into the covenant like one of the tribes of Israel. There are other odd things about the Danites. They appear to have changed their religion, Judges 18, to have had no objection to carved wood and cast metal images or to foreign priests. A group of southern towns in the neighborhood of Jaffa is connected with Dan, and at Jaffa is Tel Qasili, an important 11th and probably almost also 12th century coastal town with a temple and much pottery of the sort that is connected with the sea peoples. Philistine pottery, see below. Quite a large piece of the land is in question, which later the Jews knew as Philistine. Joshua 21:24. According to the theory, this would have been before the northward migration which settled the Danites in the old Canaanite city of Laish, where the native population dwelt in security after the manner of the Sidonians. Quite and unsuspecting, their sense of security and the distance from their Sidonian allies was their undoing, for the Danites took the city and rebuilt it. This city of Dan is moreover the farthest north that the so-called Philistine pottery has been found. The biblical narrative is a tale of action, a success story, but the atmosphere is probably true enough to how things were in that troubled 12th century when the identities of desert nomads, northern migrants, and sea raiders could be confused. One detail of the northward track of the Danites in search of a home recalls the release at Medinet Habu. Since 600 armed warriors made a camp and then set forward, putting the little ones and the cattle and goods in front of them. Judges 18:21. Sidon was defeated by Ashkelon about 1100. Tiglath-Pileser, one of Assyria. So these events should have taken place in the 12th century. Perhaps behind these speculative reconstructions, we may see shadowy outlines of 12th century history and of little known people which came, like the Philistines, to be absorbed by the Israelites. Alright, in the conclusions, the new raiders of Ramses III's time, the Dinuan or Danuna, the Jajeker, Peliset, and Weshesh, attacked by land as well as sea, with the main land invasion following one of or possibly two routes from Anatolia through Syria-Palestine to the Nile Delta. Their aspect is that of farmers uprooted and looking for land, like the Libyans in their wars with Egypt. The Dinyan may have come from no further than the Haiti in their later history. Whether or not we credit them with a prolonged existence in Palestine as Danites does place them firmly and historically in the extreme north of Syria, where I suspect the Chardana once lived. The trajectory probably came from as far as Troad, perhaps by way of Cyprus, and they too were settled on the Palestinian coast north of the Danites. at the end of the 12th century for the West Shesh, information is almost wholly lacking apart from a hinted connection with Ilios Troy. Both may have connections with the Tarisha. Alright, some chronological tables. Let you know what happened, what times. Alright, in this book, The Kingdom of Mycenae, a Greek Kingdom in the Late Bronze Age, Aegean, by Jurat M. Kelder. I'm going to show how the Danian, they had a different name called the Tanaju, or Tanaja. The location of Tanaya has been a matter of debate. However, an inscription from the reign of Imhotep III, 1427-1400 BC, indicates that the Tanua should be sought on the Greek mainland, comprising at least various regions in Peloponnese. This inscription is known as the Kum el Hitan text, named after a village on the west bank of the Nile, not far from modern Karnak and Luxor. Moreover, the same text strongly suggests that the core territory in the heartland of Tangua should be sought in the Argold around the centers of Mycenae and Nupleum, as these are mentioned first and are the only centers mentioned, as opposed to the regions that follow. The Tanayah appears only for a relatively short period in Egyptian sources, from ca. 1437 BC, the 42nd regnal year of Tutmosis III, until at least ca. 1352 BC, the death of Amenhotep III. I have already noted that since Tenuyua covers the largest part of the map of mainland Greece, we are essentially left with two options: either to equate the Tenua with the Ayawa, or to look for Ayawa elsewhere, on the Isles or in the north of Greece. The fact that the Mycenaean kingdom Tenua appears in Egyptian texts around the time of the first Ayawan incursions into western Anatolia may suggest that the two were in fact one and the same. Tenua has been equated with the Ethnicon Danaoi, the name of one of the legendary royal families in the Argold, which came to be used as a destination for the troops under the command of Agamemnon in the Iliad. The Tenua, in effect, disappears from the Egyptian record, and textual references to the Aegean in general disappear, with the possible exception of a number of sea peoples circa 1200 BC, such as the Ekwesh, Ayua, and the Dinuan, and the Tanjua, compared to the biblical tribe of Dan. And see on the second to the left, we see he's wearing tassels with a kilt. All the way to the right, we see one wearing tassels with a kilt on the kilt. So the four corners of the garments. Royal gift exchange between Mycenae and Egypt, olives as greeting gifts in the late Bronze Age Eastern Mediterranean. Author Jared M. Kelder. Quote, as the annals point to a king of Danaoi who is sending greeting gifts to the Egyptian court. It appears likely that the Danaoi was a state rather than just a geographical region, at least in Egyptian eyes. Danaoi is referred to in several later texts, but these generally are regarded as copies of geographical lists like the one mentioned above, originally dating to the reign of Amenhotep III. The Greek mainland in effect only appears in Egyptian written sources in the period between Thutmose III ca. 1479 through 1425 BCE and Amenhotep III circa 1390 through 1352 BCE. Much later, during the reign of Ramses III, circa 1184 through 1153 BCE, the Ekwesh, who are listed as one of the invading sea peoples, may represent a group from the Greek mainland, but then we are dealing with a people rather than a state. End quote. All right. The Danu, author Leicester B. Holland, source Harvard University's in Classical Philosophy, 1928, volume 39, pages 59 through 92. All right, so here's the text. I'm just gonna scroll down to parts that I think um, are of interest. If you would like to, you could download this and read it for yourself. All right, so here we got. Thus, the problem of the Achaeans and the Pelasgians, once a major battlefield for antiquarians, has become a no man's land, and many archaeologists tread lightly and breathe soft when near the debatable ground. Therefore, he argues that the Shaftgrave kings late Helladic first were Pelasgians, in that there was an invasion of Achaeans from the north shortly before the Trojan War, followed by another northern invasion of Dorians, this time shortly after the war. Sir Arthur Evans maintains that there was an invasion and widespread colonization of Greece from Crete in the late Minoan period. Apparently, he does not believe in any further invasion before that of the Dorians. Scroll down. All right. Now, if we turn to legendary history for an explanation of this archaeological picture, we find no Greek tradition of any conquest from the north before the Dorian invasion, nor any tradition of an invasion from Crete at any time. The inhabitants of Greece at the time of the Trojan War are generally called Achaeans, and Herodotus, undoubtedly acquainted with the best 6th and 5th century traditions, says that though the inhabitants of the particular district known in classical times as Achaia had moved there from another section, yet they, like the Arcadians, Centaurians, had always been inhabitants of the Peloponnese. On the other hand, Herodotus and others say that the original inhabitants of the Peloponnese were the Pelasgians, their eponymous ancestor, Pelagus, being the first man in Arcadia. while the eponymous ancestor of the Achaeans, the great grandson of Delison, was a man of relatively late birth and of northern forebears. But the heroes camped before Troy are not called Achaeans only in the Iliad. They are frequently and collectively called Argives, and still more often Danaans. The name Argives requires little explanation. The leader of the host and the greatest contingent of the warriors came from the lands about Argos, hence the geographic name, which strictly applied only to the residents of a limited district, was extended to include the inhabitants of all Greece. The names Archaoi and Danaoi seem to be used with no distinction at all between them. The Argioi presumably got their name from their land, which in turn was named for its principal city. Danaoi was evidently a racial or tribal name. Pausanias says that both Argives and the Lacedaemonians were called Archaeans, but that the name Danaoi was particular to the Argives. Points out that all the Greeks at Troy were called Argioi because they were serving under Agamemnon. All right. But it is quite unnatural to use two distinct tribal names for exactly the same people, and therefore we must conclude that at the time of the Trojan War, the Danaoi were the dominant folk in Greece, and that Archaeoi, though originally a tribal name, had come to have a geographical significance, like Arge, only, of course, of wider extension, since Archaeus included virtually all Greece, while Argos was the capital district only. The Greek name Pelagosogli might have been given the older people by the conquering Achaeoi either as a meaningless imitation or their unintelligible non-Greek name, or perhaps as signifying sea, folk, a reasonable epithet in the eyes of land immigrants for those of the island race. All right. Danos, obviously an eponymous hero representing the tribe of the Danaoi, is consistently stated to have arrived in a pentecounter to the Argolic Gulf. He gave rise to the preposterous but picturesque and therefore popular story that the Danos had arrived in a ship with Irntant Copan. Given the 50 daughters of Danos, the real followers of the Viking would naturally become the enamored 50 sons of Aegyptus. Atreus' son is leader of the Greeks before Troy, and with his great-grandson the line is finally overwhelmed by the Dorian invasion. See where I want to read off of here. Probably from older official Athenian documents shows that the foregoing chronology was accepted by Greek historians, for it specifically states that the pentacounter of Danos arrived in the year 1510 through 1509 BC. Archaeology shows that the change from the shaft grave to the Tholos tomb dynasty at the Mycenae occurred about 1500 or a little earlier, and that the great fortification walls with the Lion Gate in the existing court and the Magron of the palace there were all built about 1400. Since these dates agree so perfectly with the traditional dates for the coming of the Danaans and the founding of Mycenae by Perseus, is it not reasonable to accept the traditions as substantially historical? Of course, as the founder of a line, any historic Perseus was sure to be overlaid with myth. Though a Danite, he was obviously not a son of the eponymous Danos, who had seized Argos 3 or 4 generations earlier. Besides this, his father ought to be a god, so an eponymous Danaoi was nominated as his mother. All right. Again, since Greek pride always brought the ultimate ancestry of conquerors back to Greece, that's important, back to Greece. His mother was said to be an exiled daughter of the Argive king whose kingdom he more or less violently acquired. For the same reason, probably, through the far-wandering Io, the line of Danos himself was brought back to an Argive origin, as similarly to in Attica, Theseus was given a clandestine parentage which should make him rightful heir to the kingdom he conquered. Greek tradition not only states definitely that the pre-Dorian invaders of the Argoloid were Danaans and not Achaeans, but it goes further and indicates clearly whence these invaders came. Danos is uniformly said to have come from Egypt, some authorities adding that he stopped at Rhodes on the way. Perseus also was from the east, coming by the way of the island of Syrphos. The hero myths that grew up about his early life before he reached Greece said that he had rescued an Ethiopian princess from a sea monster and had brought her along with him. It may be that there is some connection between this princess and the snake goddess whose little images appear to abundantly just at the time of Perseus. Perhaps the cultivation of wheat was introduced by this second wave of Danaans, and with it came the cult of the Eastern Mother Goddess. Joppa on the coast of Palestine is given by some authors as the point from which Perseus imported Andromeda. Alright, if we follow these traditions, the Danaans evidently neither were Cretians nor did they come from the north. It has been suggested that when tradition gives Egypt as the place of origin, Crete is really meant, the two being in the same southeasterly direction from Greece. All right. But it should not be forgotten that since Tutmosis I in the 16th century had set his northern boundary stone on the Euphrates, Egypt at the time of the Danaan invasion included the whole of Syria and Palestine. All right, see the quote right here. According to legendary history, the Danaans were not the only late Hellenic invaders of Greece, nor Argos the only focus of invasion, though probably because of the unbroken traditions of the harem. The Argive picture is more complete and doubtless more reliable than any other. Cadmus is regularly called a Phoenician. So Cadmus is regularly called a Phoenician, but Pausanias says that some think he came from Egypt, not Phoenicia. Of course, in the 16th century, the great Semitic sea power, later known as the Phoenicians, did not yet exist. Phoenicia was simply one section of the Egyptian seacoast. Very likely, he was the leader of the first of the Viking bands to descend on Greece from the eastern seas. His name is a personal one and gives no hint as to whether he belonged to the Danaoi or to some other tribe or race. From this, it is reasonable to infer that the chieftains of Peleus and of Sparta in late Hellenic times were of the older stock, though the presence of Tholos tombs at both sites shows that the culture of the Danaans had, by intermarriage or by contact, become dominant there as well. By the time of the Trojan War, the two races had become so completely fused that the tribal name of the Argive leaders could be applied to the whole host of the Greeks. Inscriptions of Ramses III tell of a great confederation of the 9 peoples of the bow and the foreigners of the isles. All right. Besides this, the name occurs alone on 2 other inscriptions of Ramses III, closely linked with the Paraset, also known as Peliset, and almost equal importance on the Zeker or Jeker and the Danian Dauna. All right. There is inconclusive confirmation of this conjecture in one of the Amarna letters written from Byblos in the first half of the 14th century, which speaks of a people at that time located there whose name is read Danaoi or Dan-una. Or if it be correct, it probably refers those later called Danoin or Denyun. All right. There is a temptation to see some connection, in name at least, between the Dan-una and Dan. Dan was the northernmost tribe of Israel, its territory reaching as far as Joppa, and apparently it alone of the Israelitish peoples took to the sea. Judges 5:17. Perhaps Danite seafarers were in the service of the Philistines and migrated with them. The tribe disappears from later Hebrew history. That's of great importance right there. Or possibly one section of the Philistines occupied territory that had belonged to Dan and so were called Dan-una. If the tradition be accepted that the ancestors of the Homeric heroes Danos, Cadmus, Cercops, and Perseus came from the eastern end of the Mediterranean from the tribes of the Danaoi and Paraset, the older Philistines, the strangeness entirely disappears. So Perseus from Joppa was perhaps an ancestor of Goliath. All right. All right, this is a appendix that I got from United Church of God and the International Association. They put some interesting um, sources together. So were the Greeks Israelites. Alright, and the reason why I decided to go ahead and provide this information on this video is because I thought it was of great importance. It's to me, it's it seemed like it should be in consideration. Um, Hectius of Abdera, a Greek historian of the 4th century BC, tells us that the Egyptians, formerly being troubled by calamities, in context assumingly the 10 plagues of the time of the Exodus, in order that the divine wrath might be averted, expelled all the aliens, i.e., Israelites, gathered together in Egypt. Of these, some under their leaders Danos and Cadmus migrated into Greece, others into other regions, the greater part into Syria, i.e., the whole eastern Mediterranean, including the land of Israel. Their leader is said to have been Moses, a man renowned for wisdom and courage, founder and legislator of the state, cited by C.W. Muller, Fragmenta Historicum Graecum, 1883, volume 2, page 385. In confirmation of the Israelite identity of these people, Diodorus of Sicily, a historian of the 1st century BC, states, "They say also that those who set forth with Danos, likewise from Egypt, settled with what is particularly the oldest city of Greece, Argos, and that the nations of the Chalkee in Pontus, and that of the Jews which lies between Arabia and Syria, were founded as colonies by certain immigrants from their country, i.e., Egypt, and this is the reason why it is a long established institution among these peoples to circumcise their male children, the custom having been brought over from Egypt. Even the Athenians, they say, are colonists from Sas in the Nile Delta of Egypt. Book 1, section 28, 1 through 5. Whether or not Danos and Cadmus were actual people is difficult to ascertain. Danos was supposedly the head of the Danaoi, under whom Argos flourished, and Cadmus was considered by the Greeks of Thebes to have founded their city. Will Durant, The Story of Civilization, Volume 2, The Life of Greece, pages 40, 72. Yet these may have simply been the Israelite tribal names Dan and Gad. Such a possibility should be considered, since the us endings are Latinized Greek suffixes. Cadmus would actually be Cadm, perhaps Gadim in Hebrew, meaning Gadites. Indeed, the famed Greek poet Homer often used the term Danaans for the Greeks, for this name or variants such as Danae or Danaoi is what they called themselves. Dr. Robert Latham, a respected ethnologist of the 19th century, made the connection, writing, quote, "Neither do I think that the eponymous epom or ancestral name of the Argive Danae, i.e., Greeks of Argos, was other than that of the Israelite tribe of Dan. Only we are so used to confining ourselves to the soil of Palestine in our consideration of the history of the Israelites that we ignore the share they may have taken in the ordinary history of the world. Yet with the Danae and the tribe of Dan, this is the case, and no one connects them." End quote. Ethnology of Europe, 1852, pages 137. Yet more scholars since have connected them. See Cyrus Gordon, Common Background of Greek and Hebrew Civilizations, 1966. Alan Jones, Bronze Age Civilization, The Philistines and the Danites, 1975. Danaans and the Danites, Were the Hebrews Greek? Biblical Archaeology Review, June 1976, Against the Tide. An interview with maverick scholar Cyrus Gordon, Biblical Archaeology Review, November through December 2000, pages 52 through 63. And the connection had even been made by the people in question themselves at one time. The first century Jewish historian Josephus recorded the contents of a letter sent to the Jews of the Holy Land a few centuries earlier by the king of Lacedaemonians, the Spartans of southern Greece. Arius, king of the Lacedaemonians, to Anus, the Jewish high priest, sendeth greeting. We have met with a certain writing, whereby we have discovered that both the Jews and the Lacedaemonians are of one stock, and are derived from the kindred of Abraham. It is but just, therefore, that you, who are our brethren, should send to us about any of your concerns as you please. We will also do the same thing, and esteem your concerns as our own, and will look upon our concerns as in common with yours. Demotless, who brings you this letter, will bring your answer back to us. This letter is foursquare, and the seal is an eagle with a dragon, a serpent in its claws. Book 12, Chapter 4, Section 10. This was the heraldic emblem of the tribe of Dan, flag, the Jewish Encyclopedia, page 405. Apparently derived in part from Jacob's prophecy. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path. Genesis 49, verse 17. And the four main standards surrounding God's tabernacle in the wilderness, those of Ephraim, Judah, Reuben, and Dan, see Numbers 2, are widely believed to have carried the emblems of a bull, a lion, a man, and an eagle, respectively, parallel to the four living creatures surrounding God's throne in heaven. Revelation chapter 4, verse 7, and the faces of the angelic cherubim. Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 10. Later, another Jewish high priest, Jonathan, wrote back to the Spartans in affirmation concerning the kindred that was between us and you, because we were well satisfied about it from the sacred writings. It is a long time since this relation of ours to you hath been renewed, and when we upon holy and festival days offer sacrifices to God, we pray to him for your preservation and victory. Book 13, chapter 5, section 1. Indeed, the sacred writings do address this matter indirectly, for by the time of the Israelite judge Deborah around 1200 BC, the tribe of Dan had become a seafaring people, sailing on ships. Judges chapter 5, verse 17. They were no doubt later the preeminent sailors of Solomon's fleet, which plied distant waters with the Phoenicians. See 1 Kings chapter 9, verse 26 through 28. Chapter 10, verse 22. 2 Chronicles chapter 8, verse 18. Chapter 9, verse 21. And then notice this from Ezekiel, Dan also and Yavin, i.e. the Old Testament Hebrew word for the Greeks. See Smith's Bible Dictionary. Going to and fro, as mariners, occupied thy fares. 27:19, KJV. So a close relationship still existed between Dan and the Greeks. It should be noted that not all of the Greeks were Israelites. Indeed, the word translated Greece in the Old Testament is, as mentioned, Yavin, who was one of the sons of Noah's son Japheth. In Genesis chapter 10, verse 2, says scholar Cyrus Gordon, Noah's son Shem is the ancestor of the Semites. Japheth, another son of Noah, is connected with the Greeks. Now look at Genesis chapter 9, verse 27. May God enlarge Japheth and let him dwell in the tents of Shem. The Greeks will dwell in the tents of the Semites. In other words, the Aegean area was Semitic before it became Indo-European. Biblical Archaeology Review, November through December 2000, page 61. When the New Testament uses the term Greeks, it is clearly referring to Gentiles, non-Israelites. Of course, this is mainly because all people who weren't Israelite were considered Greeks. The Greek language and culture having been spread throughout the known world. Furthermore, by the time the New Testament was written, most of the Danaans of Greece nearby lands had migrated elsewhere. All right, this is the Philistines and the other sea peoples, text and archaeology. This isn't the book; it's just like a preface. But I thought it was really important because it gives you at least a chronology. And this book is really expensive. It's like $91. Who's so famous among these West Aegean migrating peoples were the Philistines, best known for their negative portrayal in the Bible as a major antagonist of ancient Israel. So this gives you what were the Sea People groups um, during what time and what Egyptian texts, so the primary sources. And if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So my bad, 10. There's 10 Sea People groups. All right. Like I said, I don't have this. You can get the most out of it. I'll pull it up after I'm finished. Or in another video of the book. Maybe I'll do a part 2 or 3 of this. And I'll bring up some parts of the book. Alright, so this is the Greek age of the bronze, the Sea Peoples. It just shows you like the map, the depiction of what they look like, the weapons they had, their names in Egyptian, what happened under what, pharaoh. It's pretty informative. I'm gonna scroll down to the Dinyan. So the Egyptian primary sources mentioning sea peoples according to a specific group are the following: Dinyan, the Amarna letters, Amarna tablet 151, Amenophis 3rd and 4, and Adminit Habu Ramses 3rd, Harris Ramses 3rd, Anu Maskatkan of Amenhotep, late 20th to 22nd dynasty. The other primary sources mentioning sea peoples according to specific group are the following: the Dinyan, the Hittite sources, letter from Ramses II and Hatsuli III, Karatep inscription, early 1st millennium BCE, Karatep inscription, 8th century BCE. The same depiction I had. You can clearly see the Celt with the tassels or the fringes on the four corners of the garment. It's the helmets, weapons. It helps you identify which sea people were who. The body armor they were wearing. In the Battle of Ramses III against the Libyans, both the Shurdan and what seems to be the Paliset or the Dinyan are fighting as mercenaries for the Pharaoh's army. Alright, so this is some of the helmets they were wearing. As you can see, this one, it was in my PowerPoint slide. They were wearing one of those that the stiffened hair in the back. Here comes the Dinyan. Alright, the Dinyan. Based on New Kingdom Egyptian texts, the Dinyan are considered one of the major groups of the sea peoples, and they were outstanding seamen and warriors. The Dinyan are known from Egyptian, Hittite, and classical sources. In the historical sources, the Dinyan are known by many different names, such as Danuna, Danonites, Diana, Danas, Danaids, Dini, Danie, Daniana. The earliest Egyptian text is the El Amarna letters, mid 14th circle BC, which tells of Pharaoh Amenhotep IV's vassal, the king of the Phoenician city of Tyre, Abimelech. The El Amarna letter number 151 tells of the king of Dinyan's death and that his brother became king and his land is at peace. The Dinyan next appeared during the reign of Ramses III, 8th year, about 1191 or 1184 BC, at his martyr temple of Medinet Abu. The relief tells that there was a confederation of Peliset, Jeker, Shekelesh or Shelet, it's supposed to be Shekelesh, Dinyan, and Weshesh that united to attack Egypt. The Dinyan are also mentioned in the Papyrus Harris, where Ramses III himself tells us about his victory over the Sea People, and in the text of the Onomasticon of Amenhotep, which mentions the Dini and Gardiner, suggests identifying the Dini with the Danuna or Danaoi that may refer to a tribe living in the plain of Argos. All right. There are several theories on where the Danian came from. One, Eastern Cilicia, Mycenae, Canaan. The first theory is that the Danian came from Cilicia, is based on the name of Adana, a city in the eastern part of Sicilia or Cilicia, under the name Adania, which was named by Telepenus, whose reign is now dated at 1525 1500 BC. According to Barnett, the Danian lived in Cilicia in the 9th century BC and caused alarm to their neighbors Amnas Columnu of Samuel. Not only the Danian of El Amarna, but the Dan of the Egyptian sources as well were the inhabitants of the Cilician Adana, without any connection with Greece. The islands where Ramses III situated the Danian were tiny islets and caps of the Sicilian coast. The Danian are also known from the Carpti inscription, which mentions the legendary Greek hero named Mopsus. Mopsus is said to have found Aspindos, which is identical to the town that Azutawada in Cilicia. The event, according to the Greeks, are supposed to happen after the fall of Troy in 1180 BC. A second theory associated with the Achaean world equating the Danian with the Danube from mainland Greece. Many scholars associate the Danian with the Greeks because all Greeks were referred to as Danons by Homer. The fact that Homer lends the name Danons to the Achaeans is a credible suggestion because the Danons came from Mycenae. Greek traditions suggest that the Danaoi settled in Argos and were named after Danos. The third theory that suggests the Danian origins come from Canaan. The Danian and other sea peoples returned to Levant as a counter migration. While many of the Danian went to the Aegean and Mycenae and became known as the Danons. Others went to Asia Minor, and some of the sea peoples returned to Levant. The Danian were accepted into the confederation of the tribes of Israel called Dan. The Danian were part of the confederation in the Levant with other groups of sea people, especially the Peliset. They were part of the sea battle against the Egyptians, which is depicted on the relief at Medinet Abu. The biblical data shows that at a certain stage of its settlement, the tribe of Dan was very close to the people of the sea. From the historical and mythological sources, it is possible to ascertain the following facts. The tribe of the Danaoi, or Danae, originated in the east, and the introduction of the alphabet to Greece is attributed to it. Its members were outstanding seamen who had special connection with sun worship. The association with the tribe of Dan is because there was two different tribes, the Danites and the Danaoi, with identical names and similar characteristics, which operated in the same geographical region and period, or there is a link between the tribe of Dan and the tribe of Danaoi, and possibly a certain measure of identity. In conclusion, although the Danaoi are known from many different sources, they were a major part of the confederation that attacked Egypt with the other group of sea people. The origins of the Danaoi are many and very unclear. More likely, the Danaoi were coming from the island Sicilia because many of the texts are from that region. Is a hypothetical computer reconstruction of the Danian or the Peliset warriors based on the relief from Medinet Habu, related to the Battle of Ramses III against the Libyans. Of the Bronze Age Mediterranean, circa 1400 BC to 1000 BC. The authors are Rafael de Amato and Andrea Salembetti, and it's illustrated by Giuseppe Rava. Go to page 21, start of the Danian, zoom it in a little bit. So basically, it's already what I stated so far, so I don't want to be repetitive. As you can see, the illustration to the right, you see the second man wearing tassels or zit on the four corners of his garment or his kilt. So, go ahead and zoom in this one in for y'all. It says the Bible, our biblical data shows that at a certain stage of its settlement, the tribe of Dan was very close to the people of the sea. From the historical and the mythological sources, it is possible to construct the following theory. The tribe of Danaoi originated in the East, and the introduction of the alphabet to Greece is attributed to it. Its members were outstanding seamen who had a special connection with sun worship. Now, that's very important because the Egyptians were also sun worshippers of Ra. The association with the tribe of Dan is because they formed two different tribes, the Danites and the Danaoi, with identical names and similar characteristics, who operated in the same geographical region and period, or had a strong link between them, and possibly a certain measure of identity. All right. It just goes on to the Shekelesh and whatnot. Other tribes. All right, next. All right, so the Tel Dan excavations. So Tel Dan is one of the most important sites of the ancient Near East in general, and for biblical archaeology in particular, situated at the base of snow-capped Mount Hermon on the headwaters of the Jordan. Dan has been an important settlement from the Dan has been an important settlement from the Neolithic period, circa 5000 BC, through the early modern period. Archaeological highlights include massive early Bronze Age fortifications, ca. 2900 through 2200 BC, the earliest preserved mud brick arched gate in the world, 1900 through 1500 BC, a spectacular treasure-filled Mycenaean tomb from the late Bronze Age, 1500 to 1200 BCE, and early Iron Age first agrarian settlement that some associate with the Israelites, circa 1200 to 100 or 1200 to 1000 BCE, major fortifications in what is apparently an Israelite temple from the Iron Age to 1000 to 700 BCE, and various figurines, statues, and inscriptions from the Persian, Hellenistic, and Roman periods. Perhaps the most famous find from Tel Dan is a stele, likely commissioned by Hazael of Aram or Aram sometime in the 9th century BCE, identifying a Judite king from the house of David, and thus providing the only extra biblical reference to the famed King David from the Bible. All right. In the Bible, the site of Tel Dan makes its first appearance in Genesis chapter 14, verse 14, as a place unto which Abraham chased the captors of Lot. But in two other narratives, the site features more prominently in Judges 17 through 18 It is the final resting place for the Itinerant or Itinerant tribe of Dan who leave the coastal plain and overpower a peaceful and unsuspecting people of Canaanite Laish, the same name of the city in the 18th century BCE text from Egypt and Syria, and in the 15th century BCE conquest list of Thutmose III, before renaming the city Dan and installing a Levitical priest descended from Moses as a priest in a shrine there. The religious significance of the site is again highlighted in 1 Kings 12 and a narrative that describes Jeroboam's installation of a golden calf at the site, accompanied by sacrificial pilgrim festivals. Also, Amos 8. Dan is also mentioned as a victim of the conquest of Ben-Hadad of Aram in 1 Kings 15, verse 20, and as the northern limit of the idolized on borders of the kingdom in the biblical refrain from Dan to Beersheba and the biblical histories. Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 15. This article is from Haaretz. The author is Felipe Bostrom. It's titled Tribe of Dan, Sons of Israel, or of Greek Mercenaries Hired by Egypt. Samson the Greek, 3,000-year-old archaeological finds at Tel Dan suggest that the Danites were Aegean soldiers hired by Canaan's Egyptian overlords to keep order. Let's see if I can...
Tribe of Dan, sons of Israel, or of Greek mercenaries hired by Egypt. Samson the Greek, 3,000-year-old archaeological finds at Tel Dan suggest that the Danites were Aegean soldiers hired by Canaan's Egyptian overlords to keep order. The tribe of Dan, one of the 12 Israelite tribes, may have started as no such thing. New archaeological evidence suggests that the Danites originated with mercenaries hired from the Aegean and Syria by the Egyptian overlords of Canaan to keep order. According to the Bible, after the Israelites conquered Canaan, the land was split between the tribes, with the exception of the tribe of Dan. Bitter at their lot, the tribe went northward, conquered and destroyed the city of Laish, also called Lashem, then rebuilt it and renamed it after their ancestor, Judges 18:1-29. And the coast of the children of Dan went out too little for them, therefore the children of Dan went up to fight against Lashem, and took it, and smote it with the edge of the sword, and possessed it, and dwelt therein, and called Lashem, Dan, after the name of Dan their father, Joshua 19:47. Tel El-Kadi had been identified previously as the biblical city of Dan. Now recent excavations have uncovered a large neighborhood from the 12th-11th century BCE that shows compelling Aegean influences. The discoveries have rekindled a long-standing academic brawl over the origin of the Danites. Were they really just a tribe of Israel that was left in the cold, found a conveniently isolated city, and conquered it? Do they have anything to do with a mysterious kingdom called Ben-Yuna mentioned in ancient writing found in Turkey? Or maybe with the Danaoi, a faction of invading sea peoples, according to ancient Egyptian sources? Or with the Danaoi, one of the Greek tribes? Or are these all one and the same? The findings at Tel El-Kadi, now Tel Dan, suggest they could well be. The city of Dan was built on a mound near the southern foot of Mount Hermon, the tallest mountain in the Golan Heights. Certainly by the standards of the arid Middle East, the area is lush and fertile, well watered by natural springs. The city's position was also strategic. Smack on a key trading route between Tyre and Damascus. The first settlement there dates back 7,000 years to the Neolithic period. Among the earliest mentions of the city are Egyptian and Mesopotamian texts going back nearly 4,000 years. To the 19th century BC, the site remained more or less continuously occupied through to the end of the Roman period. By the Middle Bronze Age, around 2000 BCE, it had become a mighty city, surrounded by massive ramparts, called Laish. By the Late Bronze Age, Laish had established sprawling trade connections with the countries and coastal cities throughout the eastern Mediterranean, including Sidon and Tyre to the north, Egypt to the south, and to the west, Cyprus and Mycenaean Greece. Aegean influences, weapons and gods. Laish's ties with the Aegean seem to have been strong as far back as the 14th century BCE, as attested by the discovery of a tomb built with rough stones and a style akin to that found in Enkomi, in today's Cyprus, and in Unabarit, on the coast of today's northern Syria. In the tomb, the archaeologists found more than 100 ceramic vessels that prove by chemical analysis, to mostly originate in the Argolit in Greece, the center of Mycenaean culture during the Bronze Age. This was a time in which the Egyptians were expanding northwards. As Canaan became a province of Egypt, Laish became part of their administrative system. The excavations at Tel Dan began in 1966 under the direction of Avraham Biran and continued until 1999. After a hiatus of several years, Dr. David Elon of the Hebrew Union College renewed excavating and, based on old material and new findings, he began to suspect that an old theory about Danite origins, first proposed by Michael Astauer and Yigal Yadin in the 1960s, might be right, though their idea was at odds with the biblical narrative. Namely, that the Danites didn't begin as a tribe of Israel at all, but originated in the Aegean world. Among the Aegean influences in the city of Dan, Elon identified pithoi, large storage vessels, in several of the houses, along with pottery, figurines, and ritual items originating in the Aegean, Syria, and Egypt. The finds indicate that the peoples living in Dan were a mixed bunch who brought their eating habits, grooming practices, weapons of choice, and their gods with them to the city. Cultic chamber with bird bowl. Among the more tantalizing discoveries was a modest rectangular building containing a small chamber, a holy of holies, in the corner. Elon has identified this as a cultic structure of a type common in the Aegean. Similar buildings had been found in Ankomi and Kishin in Cyprus and at Philology on the island of Milos in Greece. Locally, the same type was found at the Philistine site of Tel Kasil in Tel Aviv. Inside the putative sanctuary in Dan were fragments of a ceramic bowl to which a ceramic bird's head was attached, called a bird bowl. A similar find was made at Tel Kasil. This is a good point to note that the Philistines who lived there are also thought by some to be of Aegean origin. The excavators at Dan also found vessels decorated with Aegean-style birds, chalices, offering bowls, a model silo, and curious brain-shaped stones that may have been used in ritual. Elon postulates that these Aegean-style artifacts in Dan suggest the presence of worshippers hailing from the Aegean, perhaps the Danaian Danuna or Danaoi in Greek, in short, one of the ancient Greek tribes. The Danaian/Danuna were also one of the so-called sea peoples of Aegean origin who invaded Egypt, as described in Ramses Ives' mortuary temple relief, 1175 BCE. Surrounding the putative cultic structure, the excavators uncovered an industrial area featuring furnaces, crucibles, blowpipe nozzles, scrap metal, and slag from bronze smelting. We found all kinds of broken objects from the Middle and Late Bronze Ages that they melted and recast into new bronze objects, tools, and weapons, Elon says. They were scavengers and recyclers who were desperate for metal. These were crisis years, the mysterious proliferation of Dan. Whether or not the Danites of ancient Israel originated in a sea people will take more proving. Meanwhile, we can say that a slab carved in Luwian script from the 8th century BCE, some 2,800 years ago, discovered in southern Turkey, attests to the existence of a Danunian kingdom. Elsewhere, in a letter found in the El Amarna archives, written to Pharaoh Amenhotep IV, the king of the Phoenician city of Tyre mentions a country called Danuna. Given the indications of very strong cultural ties between Dan and the Aegean world, Elon believes that Michael Astauer and Yigal Yadin were correct. The people of Dan originated, at least in part, with the Danaian/Danuna/Danaoi of the Aegean coastal region, probably in the coastal region where Turkey and Syria meet. The most famous Danite in the Bible is Samson, quite a central archetype of a Greek hero. He is very strong. His power resides in his long hair. He tells riddles, and he hangs out with Philistine women, Elon points out. Yet more oblique evidence may be found in the Song of Deborah, describing the tribe's various roles, and Dan. Why did he stay with the ships? Judges 5:17. Dan was apparently the only Israelite tribe that had ships and was conspicuously absent from giving support to Barak against the forces of Sisera. The writer of Judges seems to hint that the Danites originated elsewhere and were different from the other tribes, the arrival of the Danuna mercenaries. If Aegean mercenaries came to Dan, they would have been hired. The ones who would have hired them were the Egyptian overlords of Canaan to help them keep order in the land. Archaeological evidence of ancient Egyptian control over Canaan has been found throughout Israel. The Egyptians began raiding the Canaanite lands for plunder and slaves in the 15th century BCE. Though there was a hiatus in the 14th century, Egypt was undergoing a period of instability and seems to have neglected this area, allowing the Hittite kingdom, based in what is now modern Turkey, to become a major player in the region. Recognizing this threat in the 13th century BCE, the Egyptians seem to have changed their policy in Canaan. The Egyptians were worried about the Hittites in the north, who were expanding, encroaching on their borders and making deals with vassal kings in Syria and Lebanon, Elon explains. Instead of having local proxy rulers, who tended to be unreliable and rebellious, the pharaohs decided to meet the mounting threat of the Hittites by establishing a series of small forts and administrative residences across Canaan. Aside from that, at Beth Shean, These have been found in the archaeological sites of Tel Afek, Bir al-Bala, Tel Sharia, and in Tel Lachish. In Tel Dan itself, the archaeologists found Egyptian cooking pots, a razor blade, and practice arrowheads made out of bone that look Egyptian, Elon told Haaretz. He believes that Laish Dan was under Egyptian control during much of the Late Bronze Age. But the outposts of the Egyptian Empire were not manned solely by Egyptians, Elon believes. They staffed these places with professional soldiers from the Aegean, Cyprus, Syria, Turkey, Libya, Nubia, and other countries. Much like Roman legionnaires, these soldiers would commit to serve the Egyptian crown for life. And like the legionnaires, they may have been given land grants at the end of their service. This system of rule was highly advantageous to the Egyptians, since the foreigners had no allegiance to the local population, allowing the Egyptians to maintain a Pax Egyptiaca. This would explain the layers of mixed cultural material at Tel Dan, with elements from Syria, Egypt, Cyprus, and the Aegean, says Elon. We also have dozens of Egyptian cooking pots. These people served the Egyptians and the Egyptian army, but they also included merchants doing business, he adds. As is the nature of things, Elon believes that these foreigners married local Canaanite women, a theory supported by the local Canaanite cooking vessels found inside the houses, and their children were something new. But in the late 12th century BCE, in part of a thundering collapse of civilization throughout the Middle East, the Egyptians withdrew from Canaan. The erstwhile mercenaries, however, remained. David Elon believes that these people who stayed behind at Tel Dan and Yuna, Egyptians, Canaanites, and various other hybrid people, created a new amalgam society, and it is these who would become the Danites of biblical lore.
Biblical archaeology doesn't get better than this. I'm in the Galilee, northern Israel. I'm at Tel Dan. The Bible tells us that a tribe named Dan conquered this place. They dig, and what do they find? The city of Dan. And I'm wondering, are the Homeric Danaoi, the people of Helen of Troy, and the biblical Danites who built this place, are they one and the same people? Could the Danites who lived in Canaan, modern-day Israel, really be related to the Danaoi who lived in Mycenae, modern-day Greece? Let's see what we know about these two peoples from the ancient texts. In Homer's Odyssey, we discovered that the Danaoi are migrant people. Even the word Odyssey is literally associated with these migrants. Second, we learned that they are mighty warriors that chase Helen by ship to Troy. Even the great Achilles fights in their ranks. Third, they are expert craftsmen who build the famous wooden horse that fools the Trojans. And finally, the Danaoi are pagans who worship many gods. In the Bible, we find a similar profile for the Danites. We first hear about them in the story of Moses when he leaves Egypt with his 12 tribes heading to the Holy Land. Moses partitions Canaan and gives a portion to each tribe. Judah and his people, the Judahites, get Judea. This tribe later becomes the Jews. The mysterious Danites decide not to take their share and instead are the only tribe to migrate. They head north with 600 skilled warriors to a town called Laish, which they conquer and rename Dan, modern-day Tel Dan. The most famous of the Danites is Samson, a mighty warrior, more similar to the Greek Hercules than other Hebrew prophets. We also learned that the Danites are expert craftsmen, chosen to build the sacred gold-laden Ark of the Covenant. The Bible then shuns the Danites for building a temple in direct competition to Solomon's temple, where they worshipped false gods. So in the ancient texts, the Danites and the Danaoi sound quite similar. A lot of people think that the Israelites are over here, they're in the Middle East. Greek people are, in Greece. The two don't connect. Is there a connection between the Aegeans and the Israelites?
There's an ongoing, multifaceted connection between the two regions. This is pottery that's made in Greece. All this reaches Canaan through trade.
Now, what about the Philistines?
When they first come, they're very strongly Aegean. Very soon, they take in a lot of the influence from the surroundings.
The Danite territory, biblically speaking, is close to the Philistine territory, no?
There may be some sort of connection between the Danites and the Philistines. Perhaps the Danites should be connected to the Danaoi, who are one of the ancient peoples in Greece. Here you have may be a connection. And then it says that you have Dan, Danite, and Danaoi, very similar, so maybe it's connection.
What do you think?
I definitely think there are elements in the biblical story about the Danites which tells us something of a connection with the Aegean.
The Bible does give us a cryptic passage called the Song of Deborah, which would seem to state that the Danites are seafarers. The passage describes a famous battle between the 12 tribes of Israel and their oppressors, the Canaanites, led by their general Sisera. In the passage, the Israelite leader Deborah leads the Israelites to battle. But one of those tribes, the Danites, does not join them. They stay in their ships. I've come to Tel Dor, located on the northern coast of Israel. This archaeological site was at one time inhabited by the Checker, a sea peoples with connections to the Aegean. Their association with this place was written about on a famous Egyptian papyrus called The Story of Wenamun. I'm here to meet with archaeologist Ilan Sharon to find out who the sea peoples were.
Who were the sea people?
The Egyptians fought against a coalition of sea peoples who are mentioned in about half a dozen Egyptian documents. The most famous document is the relief from the mortuary temple of Ramses III. On this relief, he shows two battles. One is a sea battle on the one side of the temple, and on the other side of the temple, you see a land battle.
Ramses III's mortuary temple, Medinat Habu, shows these battles in amazing detail. The relief even distinguishes between each group of sea peoples. There were the Peleset, associated with the Philistines, and their fellow Aegeans, the Checker, who we now know migrated to Tel Dor. And then there's a mysterious group known either as the Denyen or the Danu. Sound familiar? Could these be the biblical Danites? But wait, the reliefs show yet another group of sea peoples, the Shardana. Scholars generally agree they probably came from Sardinia. And there's an archaeologist who believes he's found them in Israel. His name is Adam Zertal. What Zertal has uncovered may also connect the Shardana to the Danites through that mysterious passage in the Bible, the Song of Deborah. Amazing, unique dome-like structures whose only equivalent is found in Sardinia. And not only does this correspond with the time of the battle between Deborah and Sisera, but Sisera is not a Canaanite name. It's a Sardinian name. So the archaeology matches the biblical story. Now that we can connect three groups of migrating sea peoples, the Shardana, the Checker, and the Philistines, with the land of Israel, it's not so crazy to connect the biblical Danites with the Danu in Egypt and the Danaoi in Greece. But why would we find the Danites all the way in Greece? Maybe, during the exodus from Egypt, some Danites traveled by land to Canaan, while others migrated north by ship to the Aegean. In order to prove that the fighters at Troy who built the wooden horse were actually Danites, we need to find this Israelite tribe in Greece.
The prophetess Deborah criticizes the tribe of Dan for not joining the battle, not fighting against Sisera. She says something that's historically very important. She's telling us, A, they didn't join, they're a marginal tribe, they're sometimes in the confederation, sometimes out, and secondly, they stayed in their ships. There's the Mediterranean, there are ships. What's she telling us?
That the Danites were seafarers. After leaving Egypt with Moses, some of the Danites may have migrated north by sea and ended up in an area of the Aegean called Mycenae, to become the Danaoi written about in Homer's Iliad.
Land ho!
But can we find archaeological evidence of this migration? Amazingly enough, right after the Jews leave Egypt, vast quantities of gold mysteriously appear in Mycenae, in what are called shaft tombs. To add to the striking discovery, archaeologists believe this gold came from Egypt. But do we have a reason to think the gold came via the Danites? When the Danites helped build the Ark of the Covenant, they covered it in gold. So we know that they are expert goldsmiths. It would make sense that they would have brought their craft and their precious metal to the Aegean. If the Danaoi are really Danites who went north to Greece after the Exodus, they would most likely have stayed in contact with their fellow relatives in Israel.
We find examples of whoring after false gods that we hear about in the Bible.
We have a whole series of standing stones at Tel Dan. See that next to the wall over there?
Yeah.
5 stones placed up against the wall
Right.
that have no function.
You're telling me that this is not reinforcing the wall?
Nope.
And we could be touching the transition between paganism and monotheism because it's not statues, it's stones.
I'm in Tel Dan with archaeologist David Ilan, who has one more site to show me, a unique tomb, unlike other tombs found in Israel. Does this burial place hold the answer to our archaeological prayers?
I've waited so long to see this tomb. I've read about it, heard about it. They call it the Mycenaean tomb. It's off the beaten track. Tourists don't come here. I'm very excited. I read so much about what was found in here and so on. What makes this tomb special or Mycenaean or anything like that?
It is a local variant of a chamber tomb. Most other tombs from this period are cave tombs carved out of the bedrock. This kind of massive, large, constructed chamber tomb is very unusual. There is a lot of Mycenaean pottery that came from this tomb. There was gold buttons and earrings and bracelets, lots of bronze weapons and tools, many Mycenaean vessels, some Cypriot vessels.
Is it locally made?
The clay that the Mycenaean vessels were made out of come from the region of Mycenae.
So the stuff you found here in Tel Dan, you know for a fact came from the Mycenae region.
Right. There's an Aegean element here. At the same time, there are southern Israelite material culture elements here as well. There's an amalgamation here of the two, which in a way really is what the Bible tells us the Danites are. People that stay by their boats by the sea. They're a different group. There's something strange about them. They don't quite belong. And that may be because they're somewhat Aegean in background and in behavior.
So here we are at the end of our quest, at the site that directly connects the biblical Danites with the Homeric Danaoi. In our search, we found textual and archaeological evidence corroborating the Danites' biblical journey. And we've discovered both the Danites and the Danaoi were skilled sailors, expert goldsmiths, and had similar religious beliefs. Most importantly, we found the definitive link that bonds these two migrant cultures. A shaft tomb in which gold and other Mycenaean treasures were discovered that speak of a direct connection between Israel and faraway Greece.
The Argive genealogy, Greek mythology. So we have eponymous ancestors, also the maternal of eponymous ancestors. So we have Danos going down to Danaoi. Remember, it was the offshoot of the women. So it went from man to woman, eponymous ancestor. We also have the Sparta in Lacedaemonian. All right. We also see Catamus up there. All right. So we have the Trojan race also, Dardanos, and sons of Zeus, Jupiter. And Tros, which is the direct like closer to the Trojans time period. And notice the alios. So I've highlighted in this video, you seen the IL kappa highlighted, and the reason behind that is it's the same as EL, as in L, as in the Canaanite god. So the L is the same as God. And notice what they were he was called Elus. And Priam. in Troy. Prusa of Troy. Moses the Egyptian by Jan Assmann. The author of the earliest non-biblical account of the Exodus is Hecataeus of Abdera, who came to Egypt in about 320 BCE. In his version, the story begins at a moment of distress. A plague is ravaging Egypt. The Egyptians interpret this as a divine punishment for the presence of aliens and the introduction of alien rites and customs. Consequently, the aliens are expelled. Some, under the leadership of Cadmos and Danos, colonized Greece, while others, under the leadership of Moses, colonized Palestine. Hecataeus belonged to the very first generation of Hellenistic intellectuals who came to live in Alexandria and to take an active part in the cultural life of the new empire. His ecumenic version or vision of Egyptian history was perfectly fitting for the new world order that was emerging at Alexandria. Genetics and the Archaeology of Ancient Israel by Aaron J. Brody and Roy J. King. Who were the ancient Israelites? This is the question has been endlessly debated, but almost no attention has been paid to their biology. That is now about to change, and review of modern DNA studies gives hints to the wealth of information that might be gleaned. This is a call for the need for DNA sampling of human skeletal materials from the region. Our hope is that testing ancient DNA will give us greater understanding of the peoples of the southern Levant and scientific data regarding ancient groups and identities. A database of ancient DNA will also allow for comparisons with modern DNA samples collected throughout the greater region and the Mediterranean littoral, giving a better understanding of the long historical development of regional populations. But without sampling of ancient DNA, we may never know. The need to sample ancient human DNA also comes with a caveat regarding ancient human identities in the fractious modern political and social situations throughout the region. We wish to stress that our reconstruction of ancient group identities through archaeology says nothing about modern political claims in the Middle East. Today, there remain legal and political impediments to gathering DNA samples from ancient skeletal materials uncovered in the modern state of Israel. In general, excavating or disturbing Jewish graves is considered immoral by ultra-Orthodox groups who exert political pressure to ensure that state-funded construction projects such as roadways and other public works do not impact Jewish burials. Graves that cannot be avoided are typically excavated in a rushed manner, and skeletal materials are reburied as quickly as possible with no time for analysis or sampling. To get to the genetic side of trying to figure out who are the tribe of Dan. And what I gathered is that there's no skeleton remains found in Tel Dan. So there's no material that I can discuss as far as Y chromosomes or maternal DNA or autosomal or anything like that. But what I can do is I could try to hypothesize exactly who the tribe of Dan were based off the locations they went into. So in this first paper, it's from Brody and King, and the title is Genetics and the Archaeology of Ancient Israel, 2013. Alright, go to page 20. Aegean immigration to the southern Levant. The Y chromosome patterns of contemporary populations offers a lens through which to explore the possible demographic effects of the Iron Age 1 Philistines in the far southern coastal Levant. Apart from the J2A patterns listed above, previous studies show an Aegean focus for two non-J Y lineages, E-V13 and G-M527/L13. EV13 has been shown to have originated most probably in the Balkans circa 9000 BCE as a Mesolithic marker. Alright. While GM527L13 arose somewhat later during the late Neolithic era in coastal western Anatolia. That's a citation right there. Alright. We also find EV13 and GM527 among contemporary Palestinians and Druze from Israel. Alright. This result suggests that EV13 and GM527 may track the immigration of Aegean colonists to the southern Levant. Thus, DNA markers of contemporary populations offer us hints with which we may posit hypotheses about ancient Levantine DNA. Immigration from the Arabian Peninsula during the late Bronze Age and or early Iron Age might be expected to contribute J1E markers to Israelite populations. Settlements of Aegean-derived sea peoples may amplify the frequency of Aegean-specific markers EV13 and GM527 amongst Philistine skeletal material, while the persistence of J2A in coastal Levantine Canaanite population should be discoverable in ancient DNA samples from the southern Levant. Or just make a quick note of these EV13. So the Philistines so far have been found to carry haplogroup RM269 or R1b, as some of you might know. So they haven't been found to be carrying EV13 or haplogroup GM527. So this hypothesis was incorrect, but however, this is important because it gives us an understanding of the hypothesis that EV13 could have been, a part of the Sea Peoples and their frequency of Aegean specific markers. So that's very important to consider when we're looking at this information. All right. So go ahead. All right. Conclusions. The period that follows the Iron One in the southern Levant is one marked by the development of territorial states throughout the greater region. These patrimonial kingdoms coincide varied peoples under central leadership and newly founded administrative and religious bureaucracies. New ideologies of the state required greater alliance to the patrimonial kingdom and a tempering of a redirecting of Israelite family, clan, and tribal affiliations. Different territories and culture groups were brought under the hegemony of the Israelite patrimonial kingdom, likely increasing interconnections between varied peoples. Modern DNA studies throughout the region of the southern Levant, Middle East, and Mediterranean may currently be connected to ancient social history in a highly imprecise fashion. This is due largely to issues of dating, for which the standard of deviation is so large that it is challenging to link distinct modern DNA features to known archaeological data or historical events. By sampling skeletal materials from the southern Levant from secure archaeological contexts, we can begin to build an ancient DNA database. This database would provide ancient genetic information that we could then compare with our archaeological reconstruction of varied ethnic groups in the southern Levant in the Iron One and other periods. Ancient DNA may also be compared with modern DNA in order to better refine our understanding of the long-term histories of human groups and their interactions in the southern Levant. In the second article, we have West Asian sources of the Eurasian component in Ethiopians, a reassessment. Alright, so in this article, the presence of genomic signatures of Eurasian origin in contemporary Ethiopians has been reported by several authors and estimated to have arrived in the area from 3,000 years ago. Several studies reported plausible source populations for such a signature using haplotype-based methods on modern data or single-site methods on modern or ancient data. These studies did not reach consensus and suggested an Anatolian or Sardinia-like proxy, broadly Levantine or Neolithic Levantine as possible sources. We demonstrate, however, that the deeply divergent autochthonous African component, which accounts for 50% of most contemporary Ethiopian genomes, affect the overall allele frequency spectrum to an extent that makes it hard to control for it and at once to discern between subtly different yet important Eurasian sources such as Anatolian or Levant Neolithic ones. Here we reassess pattern of allele sharing between the Eurasian component of Ethiopian, here called NAF for non-African, and ancient modern proxies. Our results unveil a genomic legacy that may connect the Eurasian genetic component of contemporary Ethiopians with Sea People and with population movements that affected the Mediterranean area and the Levant after the fall of the Minoan civilization. Now, with this, so the Beta Israel, or they're also known as Falasha, Jews of Ethiopia, claim to be from the tribe of Dan. And what I say to that is EV13 is a subclade, a down subclade, down mutation from the Ethiopian E-M78. All right, so its forefather of EV13 is actually EL618. Let me make sure that's correct. And that's correct. And from there, EV13 was born. Well, I will say to this, you can read this. I'm gonna skip down to the conclusion and show you what they said in it. But I don't think that the Ethiopians are from the tribe of Dan at all. It doesn't make any sense. Dan went back to Anatolia or the Aegean Sea or the Balkans. The name Dardania, the Danube, like it just goes all the way up to Germany. So I don't think that the tribe of Dan settled in Ethiopia. All right, but this is the discussion. These tribes are linked to Crete, Anatolia, where they fought the Hittite Empire, Egypt, and the Levant, and are told to have settled in the land of Canaan, known also as Palestine. Interestingly, the Sea People tribes that settled in Palestine included, among others, Danian and Peliset, according to the Egyptian inscriptions of Mernachta and Medinet Habu. Although there are different theories around the origin of each of these tribes, there are suggestions that link the Danian with the tribe of Dan, from which Jews from Ethiopia have been said to descend, and the Peliset to the Philistines from the Levant. So, as I've already stated, the Philistines have been said to carry RM269 or R1B. I've also seen some J around. J was also found in Ashkelon, where the Philistines were located. So I don't think that tribe of Dan would have been associated with the Ethiopians. All right. So it also gives you the story of King Solomon, the mythical story, the mythical account of the meeting between King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. So they're trying to see the signature is still detectable after the major population movements following the Alhambra decree after 1492, and that's the Spanish Jews getting kicked out of Spain. In conclusion, our work shows that when the mixing components are deeply differentiated, such as in the case of contemporary Ethiopians' ancestry deconvolution, increases the sensitivity of allele sharing tests and enables to fully exploit the high quality of modern genomes. So, all right. Let's scroll down. I think that's it. All right. Off to the next one. All right. Standing at the gateway to Europe, the genetic structure of Western Balkan populations based on autosomal and haploid markers. All right, got this bottom part highlighted of the abstract. The genetic variation of Western Balkan populations reveals the continuity between the Middle East and Europe via the Balkan region and supports the scenario that one of the major routes of ancient gene flows and admixture went through the Balkan Peninsula. Genetic analysis based upon the variation of Y chromosome haplogroups has revealed that populations of Western Balkan countries share a large fraction of the ancient gene pool of southeastern Europe, where 70% of paternal lineages consist of 5 European-specific haplogroups: E3b1, which is E1b1b, I-P37 excluding M26, J2, R1A, and R1B. All right, so the admixture analysis of autosomal SNPs of the Western Balkan region in a global context on the resolution level of 7 assumed ancestral populations. So we see which people they would have had in common with Western Balkan. It's very similar to the Cypriots and Greeks. Spanish, all the way to Spanish. It's South Europe. All right, the Ottoman rule over the Balkans during 1519 AD led inter alia to the conversion of the local people to Islam, the largest number of whose assumed descendants live in contemporary Bosnia and Kosovo. So Kosovo is like known as like the most people, most country have an EV13 haplogroup group. I think Albania is number 2. Right. Let's see. So I think that's it. I wonder from this part. All right. Conclusions. We have analyzed and present here the new data of genome-wide autosomal diversity of 5 Western Balkan populations. The variation analysis of 660K autosomal SNPs of 70 individuals from Western Balkan population reveal a genetic uniformity that has been shown by studies of unparalleled inherited markers of these populations can be seen also at the whole genome level. Thus, culturally diverse Western Balkan populations are genetically very similar to each other, as I showed y'all. All right. The major variants of the gene pool of present-day Western Balkan populations have developed from a common source without being influenced by major population-specific bottlenecks. In a more general perspective, our results reflect clear genetic continuity between the Middle Eastern and European populations. It has been suggested recently that the Neolithic immigrants or migrants from Anatolia took mainly the maritime coastal route and island hopping to reach Europe. Genetic variation of the studied here, Western Balkan populations tend credence also to extensive, likely multiple, and possibly bidirectional gene flows between the Middle East and Europe, traversing Balkans. All right. So my next slide. All right. So the coming of the Greeks to Provence and Corsica. Y chromosome models of archaic Greek colonization of Western Mediterranean. All right. Given the origin of viniculture in Provence is ascribed to Massalia, these results suggest that EV13 may trace the demographic and social cultural impact of Greek colonization in Mediterranean Europe, a contribution that appears to be considerably larger than that of a Neolithic pioneer colonization. All right, let me read this part. A recent study of Y chromosome haplogroups in Sicilian population showed a major impact of presumptive Greek immigration to the island, estimated by admixture analysis to be about 37% using a localized Balkan Greek marker EV13. This level of admixture was higher than that predicted by classical demographic studies. Previous Y chromosome genetic studies of Phoenician colonization have demonstrated that haplogroup J2 frequency was amplified in regions containing the Phoenician colonies of Iberia and North Africa in comparison to areas not containing Phoenician colonies. However, these studies did not address the role of either Greek colonization or early Neolithic colonization of Western Europe. Y chromosome studies have investigated the contribution of various Y haplogroups to the spread of farming from Near East to Europe. All right. Haplogroup J2 frequency has been correlated with aspects of the symbolic material culture of the Neolithic in Europe and the Near East, painted pottery and ceramic figurines, and subhaplogroups of J2 have also been associated with the Neolithic colonization of mainland Greece, Crete, and southern Italy. On the other hand, EV13 appears to have originated in Greece or the southern Balkans and then spread to Sicily at high frequencies with the Greek colonization of the island. So EV13 is also found at low frequencies on the Anatolian mainland and thus may be useful in teasing apart the relative contribution of Greek colonization EV13 from early Neolithic colonization J2 to Western Europe. All right, goes into Ionians. So these are the dominant haplogroups in both Phocaea and Smyrna. It's EV13. So for Phocaea is 19.4 and Smyrna is 12.1% for EV13. R1b had the most at 22.6% and 27.8% respectively. J2A is also common with 9.7 in Phocaea and 15.5% in Smyrna. I think that's it for this one. All right. The impact of Phoenicians is minimal since the frequency of EV13 in Lebanon is 0 out of 42 samples. So, but that's not saying that Lebanese don't carry EV13. My actual closest Y chromosome match is from Lebanon. So, and his ancestors has been there for thousands upon thousands of years. That's what he told me anyways. All right, so the conclusion, the Greeks from both homeland Greece and Anatolia made a major contribution to the development of Western European culture through their Mediterranean colonies, Italy, France, and Spain during the Iron Age. Haplogroup EV13 may trace the movement of the Ionian Greeks to key areas of France and Corsica that can introduce viniculture to Western Europe. Further studies will help elucidate the relative contribution of the Greek and Neolithic migrations in other areas of the Western Mediterranean. All right, so that's it. Cool. Tracing past human male movements in northern, eastern Africa and western Eurasia. New clues from Y chromosomal haplogroups EM78 and JM12. So, depleted population data were obtained on the distribution of novel biallelic markers that finally dissect the human Y chromosome haplogroup EM78. Among 6,501 Y chromosomes sampled in 81 human populations worldwide, we find 517 EM78 chromosomes and assign them to 10 sub-haplogroups. Even microsatellite loci were used to further evaluate subhaplogroup internal diversification. The geographic and quantitative analysis of haplogroup and microsatellite diversity is strongly suggestive of a northeastern African origin of EM78 with a corridor for bidirectional migrations between northeastern and eastern Africa, at least 2 episodes between 25.9 to 17.3 KY and 18 through 5.9 KY ago. Trans-Mediterranean migrations directly from northern Africa to Europe, mainly in the last 13 KY and flow from northeastern Africa to western Asia between 20 and 6.8 KY ago. A single clade within EM78, EV13, highlights a range expansion in the Bronze Age of southeastern Europe, which is also detected by haplogroup JN12. Um, geographically, a pattern of molecular radiation and fluorescence estimates for both haplogroups are similar and reveal that the genetic landscape of this region is, to a large extent, the consequence of a recent population growth in situ rather than the result of a mere flow of Western Asian migrants in the early Neolithic. So it's recent, not Neolithic. Our results not only provide a refinement of previous evolutionary hypotheses, but also well-defined time frames for past human movements both in northern, eastern Africa and western Eurasia. All right, so this study is from 2007. So just pulled it up though because I think it's important so people can understand the subclades of EM78. So you have EM78, which is the father of EV12, EV13, EV22, EV32, and EV65. And so this, for those that believe in a young Earth, this didn't just happen within the last 3 or 4,000 years. So get that 4,000 years out your head. Humans have been here longer than that. So it's showing the different subclades that are found amongst European populations. As you can see, EV13 is mainly the haplogroup along with some EV22, but it's mainly EV13. Literally spread everywhere, especially where the Danube connects. All right, so that 15.49% in Greece from Aegean Islands. So Albanians have 32.29. Moroccan Jews carries 2%. Libyan Jews carry 4%. It's even found in Egypt. Turkish. So the Turkish Cypriot, that's pretty important because you see it's equivalent to the Druze. It's very close, similar. So I believe geneticists actually believe there's some type of connection there. It's not found in Sephardi Turkish though. I would like to highlight that. Alright, so this is a focus of where all of the subclades of EM78 are located. As you can see, EV13 is the most European out of the haplogroups. Let me see. back that up for you. There you go. So it spread inside the Balkans and just migrated everywhere from left to right, all the way up to Scandinavia. So the hypothesis, or what they found out, is EM78 originated somewhere in Northeast Africa, or North Africa, or Eastern Africa, while its subclades originated in like Western Asia. That's where you're gonna find majority of them dispersing is from Northeast Africa to Western Asia, especially EV13. However, there is one EV13 that was found in the Ibero-Mauritian cave samples, and he was an EV13. One of them was EV13. All right, so the haplogroup EV13 migrations and demographic expansions in Western Eurasia. These results open the possibility of recognizing time windows for one, population movements from the EM78 homeland in northeastern Africa to Eurasia, and two, population movements from Western Asia into Europe and later within Europe. Under this hypothesis, EV13 chromosomes sampled in Western Asia and their coruscants estimate detect a likely Paleolithic exit out of Africa of EM78 chromosomes devoid of the V13 mutation, which later occurred somewhere in the Near East, Anatolia. As to a Western Asia-Europe connection, our data suggests that Western Asians carrying EV13 may have reached the Balkans anytime after 17 KY ago, but expanded into Europe not earlier than 5.3 KY ago. All right, next we have the Y chromosomal analysis of Greek Cypriots reveals a primary common pre-Ottoman paternal ancestry with Turkish Cypriots. Let's see. In terms of Y haplogroup frequencies, again, GCY and TCY show very similar distributions, with the predominant haplogroups in both being J2A M410, EM78, which is EV13, and G2P287. Just scroll through this one. See, I want to highlight that they use wet Ackley's predictor. It's crazy. It's crazy how scientists or geneticists have to use a haplogroup predictor. You know, a YSTR based phylogenetic network of the most prevalent Cypriot haplogroups J2A, J1, EM78, EM123, G2A R1V. Alright. Due to the fact that a key study containing Turkish and Kurdish samples from central Anatolia did not provide specific subclades for haplogroup E1b1b, a validated haplogroup prediction tool was used for determining those. It's crazy. So they use Whit-Athes, and Whit-Athes doesn't tell you it's EV13 because it's Whit-Athes is out of date. It just is not. It's not useful. Like NevGen is the better of the two. And I understand like NevGen could have been just up and coming when this came out, but still, NevGen is just so much better than Whit-Athes. You can actually find out the S&P or the down subclade. All right, at any point too, please, if I'm not reading something you want to, just please stop the video at that point and read. I try to go as slow as possible through the slides or through the article for you to grasp. Because some of this stuff I already went over. Just information given in different context. Showing specific haplogroups being did not have any specific structure. Look how high is in the middle. It has Albanian, Greek, and the EM123 has Italy, Lebanon, Turkey, Tunisia. I don't know what the UB is on this one. No, Lebanon is twice on the EM78. Hmm. Oh, it's I don't know. I guess it's Libya. Yeah, it's the Libya. It's probably the Libyan Jews. All right, showing the most frequent major Y haplogroup subclade in both GCY and TCY was J2A, followed by EM78, G2P287. Alright, so this is a distribution. So you understand what haplogroups are where. And remember, like I said, where you see EM78, it's more than likely EV13 when it comes to Southeast Europe, even Spain. So its majority is EV13. Going down to like this Cyprus, some EV12s, maybe onesies and twosies of EV22s, but it's mainly EV13. All right. Haplogroup EM78 also was found at relatively high frequencies among Cypriots, 12.8%, 13.9%. Haplogroup EM78 is particularly high among Greeks as well as Albanians, and Cypriot M78 belongs predominantly to haplogroup subclade EV13, which I'm not sure why they just haven't put EV13 since they put it right here, but that's what you get when you use wet athes, I guess. Somehow they magically figured out it was EV13. So they're saying that Cypriot patrilineages have a volcanic origin characterized primarily by haplogroup EV13 and I2, as well as specific subclades of G2A introduced in the island from mainland Greece during the late Bronze Age and throughout the Iron Age. Y'all get it? That is your sea peoples. That is your sea peoples, because they was all, every time they got defeated and whatnot by Egypt, that's where they settled, is on those isles, those islands. And it tells you during the late Bronze Age and throughout the Iron Age. So that could be, EV13, I2, G2A could have possibly, when they were leaving, like if they were part of the Danites or the Sea Peoples, like for the tribe of Dan or the Danaoi, they could have stopped in Cypriot and just decided to stay there, because when they came to Canaan, the land of Canaan, basically they just mixed with the women. It's just military, so they just took whatever women that was there and they just went with them. All right, so it's got the figures. All right, next article. All right, Y chromosome phylogeographic analysis of Greek Cypriot population reveal elements consistent with the Neolithic and Bronze Age settlements. Admixture analysts suggested that the majority of G2A P15 and R1B M269 components were contributed by Anatolia and Levant sources respectively, while Greece Balkan supplied the majority of EV13 and J2A M67. Analysis of Cypriot haplogroup data are consistent with two stages of prehistoric settlement. EV13 and EM34 are widespread in PCA, suggests sourcing them to the Balkans and the Levant, Anatolia, respectively. All right, so admixture contribution to Cyprus. We then focus on EV13, GP15, I2, M423, J2A, M67, J2B, M12, and R1B, M269 haplogroups that we view as the most appropriate Anatolian, Balkan, Danube Basin, Greece, and Levant proxies reflecting Neolithic and Bronze Age human dispersals. Date estimates. We estimate the time of expansion of EV13, J2A, I2, J2A, J2B, and R1B lineages in Cyprus and their time of divergence from Anatolian, Balkans, Greek, and Levantine sources. Timex and TD date lineages, assuming that the observed variance has arisen indigenously within a given population as a result of a unique founder-based migration from an outside source. Overall, results, the complex genetic structure of Cyprus. Overall, the EN35 haplogroup totals to 23.1% and contains various EM78 sub-haplogroups, including EV13, 7.3%, that is common in Greece, and EV22 at 3.5%, that is frequent in Egypt and Sudan. Another EN35 related haplogroup, EN34, previously reported in Asia Minor, Southern Levant, and the Balkans, also was observed in Cyprus, 10.3%. So they were found to have more than, or just about the same or more than EV13. Although when using the entire set of Y chromosome haplogroup frequencies, the composition of Cyprus can be explained by contributions from Anatolia, Balkans, and Levant, the actual Greek contribution stood out for the Cypriot EV13, 87%. J2A M67, 74%, R1B M269 at 48%, and GP15 at 17% components. Lastly, Levant contribution up to 30% of Cypriot R1B M269, and to a lesser extent regarding the Cypriot J lineages 3 to 8%. Subsequently followed later by the expansion of EV13, I2, J2B, 4,400 to 6,600 year BP, fast 1,500 to 4,500 BP. Alright, however, times of divergence of these lineages from current Anatolian, Danubian, Greek, and Levantine YCRs appear more recent. So, divergence of EV13, J2A, and R1B would have taken place in modern time range 300 to 2,200 year BP. Alright, centripetal gene flows during pottery Neolithic. It has been hypothesized that J2B may have been associated with the Neolithic immigration of farmers to Greece. We also have haplogroup J2B splits into J2B, so M12 splits into M205, and remaining 31 samples overlap with the Anatolian Greek EV13 lineages. So EV22 and EN34 are common in the southern Levant, Sicily, Bulgaria, and in Egypt, and rare in Europe. All right, so late Bronze Age, Cyprus and maritime trade. EV13 is common in the Balkans and may mark some of the Greek demographic input to Cyprus from the late Bronze Age through the Iron Age. I wonder why. Sea peoples. All right, conclusions. We report a comprehensive, granular Y chromosome portrait of modern day Cyprus, some structural Elements are consistent with Neolithic settlements in the central and eastern Mediterranean. Ancient DNA surveys from continental Europe have revealed a subsequent major population replacement within the last 5 millennia, masking a main part of the pre-Bronze Age genetic substratum. We also detect lineages compatible with Bronze Age communities and subsequent events on Cyprus. The unstructured character of YSTR lineages within Cyprus, low genetic diversity of Cyprus, EV13, and little genetic differentiation with surrounding populations would support this view. With all this being said, y'all, if you look at the oldest like Greek haplogroups like Y chromosome, you don't find EV13. So I'm still waiting for them to tell me where exactly EV13 came from, because it definitely wasn't Greece. So maybe it was Albania, but we don't really have like really, I don't think there's many samples at all in Albania from like late Bronze Age and early Iron Age. All right. Haplogroup E3B1A2 as a possible indicator of settlement in Roman Britain by soldiers of Balkan origin. All right, so this is just, I want to show y'all that EV13 served in the Roman army. If you know about the Roman Empire, like they forced the Balkans to serve them, and like if you didn't join their army, like you got enslaved. Like if you were a veteran in their army and they called you for service, they would cut off both of your thumbs. Like the Roman Empire did not play. Like it's like you're never done with their military unless you're dead. So if they need you, you have to go back in service. It's crazy. All right, so in this paper, like, so it goes back how this place in Britain, um, they carry a good portion of EV13, and they're trying to figure out exactly where did it come from, like what was the time frame. So it's talking about EV13 and J2. Were they there before that, or did they come during that? So like I mentioned before, if you want to stop this video, read this, you can, or you can just stop the video, go download this PDF, and read it in its entirety. Alright, so I got, if EM78 had in fact arrived during the Neolithic era by water routes from Iberia and the Mediterranean, there would not appear to be any obvious reason for it to be distributed so unevenly between Britain and Ireland. Oppenheimer acknowledged this problem indirectly in Chapter 5 of his book, Invasion of Farmers, and stated in so many words that he had no explanation for the avoidance of Ireland in favor of Britain by E3B and J2. A problem that apparently did not affect other Neolithic haplogroups identified by Oppenheimer. So 2006, pages 193 to 194, 206 to 207. Namely, I1b asterisk and I1b2 allegedly following the same route along the Iberian coast from the Mediterranean. So they did that. So these haplogroups did that in Neolithic times. But E3b and J2 did not. And E3B, for those that don't know, it's E1B1B, and more than likely it's a subclade. The subclade of that is EV13. While Neolithic arrival date for E3B in Britain, as suggested by Oppenheimer, is evidently rendered impossible by Crosenia et al. 2007, a Bronze Age arrival date is not necessarily excluded. So, Beaker, folks. So it's just saying which people arrive, what cultures arrive during what times. All right. The place of origin is significant because it locates the archer's birthplace in a region of Europe other than the Balkan Peninsula at approximately the same time that EV13 only was beginning to expand from the Balkans to the rest of Europe. Therefore, it is improbable that the archer and his associated Beaker culture appears originated from a region closely associated with E3B1A2 during the early Bronze Age. Bronze Age and Iron Age Celtic style cultures have been identified by both Oppenheimer and Sykes as being associated with the so-called Western Atlantic model holotype R1B1C. So that does not include EV13. All right, bearing any later discovery of significant levels of either B or J in Ireland, it would appear that whatever historic or prehistoric migratory movements were responsible for these haplogroups' presence in Britain had little or no impact on male genetic component of Ireland. Difficulties with Neolithic, Bronze Age, and Iron Age models for the migration of E3B and J2 to Britain raise a question. If these haplogroups did not arrive during these eras, then when they have migrated? Then when might have then when might they have migrated? Okay. To assist in developing a meaningful hypothesis concerning possible migratory routes for E3B1A2 from the Balkan Peninsula to Britain, a comparison of the published holotypes from the three aforementioned population surveys was made, with the goal of identifying any residual patterns of settlement among British E3B holotypes. So it shows how they use their methodology. All right, so this shows some where they were found, Southwest Europe. And I have a paper that pretty much the project manager of EV13 on family tree DNA made paper. So that's coming up. I'm going to go through that one. This video is already long enough, so. All right. The indicated E3B hole also did not appear to conform to any of the better known medieval political divisions, such as the Danelaw, whose western border along Watling Strait bisects the central England E3B void. So where did they come up with the Danelaw? Because there definitely is EV13s in Germany, and if I'm not mistaken, that's exactly where the Danelaw originated from, North Germany, which is where I got most of my matches at. Majority of my matches are in Germany. All right. So in Saxons, Vikings, and Celts, Sykes, 2006, page 224, queried, but who were the soldiers of the Roman army? Not all from Rome, that's for sure. At their initial campaigns, when there would have been a substantial Italian contingent in the regions, the occupation itself was left in the hands of the auxiliaries. In Wales, these troops, who would be granted citizenship when they retired, were drawn largely from the valleys of the Rhine and the Danube, because being by the river is good for farming. So once you get out the military, you wanted to build a farm, and the best place to build that farm is by a river. So Dacian soldiers originating from the geographic regions near the Danube, where EV13 has been shown to have its highest frequencies worldwide. So geographic regions near the Danube, where EV13 has been shown to have its highest frequencies worldwide, while it were attested historically and epigraphically in the same regions of Britain where M78 has appeared most commonly in 3 population surveys in Will, Calpelli, and Sykes. Cruciani's finding that EV13 was present in 85% of Western European males who also were tested positive for EM78 suggested that E3B1A M78 could be used as a proxy for EV13 in most cases, with the caveat that approximately 15% of EM78 holotypes would be from subclade other than EV13. The geographic distribution of EV13 could therefore be assumed to a first approximation to be very similar to that of EM78. But obviously EM78 and EV13 are different. It's like saying I'm the same as the people in Ethiopia and Somalia, and we're not the same. It is the truth. Why should I lie? Why should I say we are the same when we're not? The neighboring region of Dardania was subsequently conquered in 28. Mosey, 1974, page 24. Dardania. So Dardania, for those who don't know, was the ancient kingdom of Kosovo and Albania. That's where the kingdom of Dardania laid. And for those that don't know, Darda in Hebrew actually means Israelite. So, what are the odds? Dardanian era in particular emerges as the contact zone between the Illyrian and Thracian languages. And yeah, without a doubt, I believe that EV13 were the Dardanians. I mean, I can't just see Albania and Kosovo being primarily EV13 and they weren't the Dardanians. I just don't see that at all. And I believe part of EV13 started migrating out before the Roman Empire, but the Roman Empire did take away a lot of EV13s from the land by forcing them to serve in their armies. Not only that, you can look up the Illyrian revolt or rebellion against the Roman Empire, and they just went to town against each other. Illyrians were not playing against the Romans. They rebelled. They did not want slavery. In fact, it was actually during that revolt. The reason being was the Romans tried to take all the teenage boys, the young boys, and away from their parents and put them into captivity, into slavery. And the Illyrians, they formed up a confederation of rebels and started attacking the Romans. He estimated the Romano-British population of the region at 4,000 plus another 500 soldiers stationed at Saguntium. I'm not even going to try to say that. In northeast Wales, the settlement of Dinarbin, southeast of Abergele, Clwyd, which was established by the Romans at the site of an earlier abandoned um, Iron Age fortress, was seen as significant by Hod. Our Abergele was discovered by to have the highest percentage of E3B in Britain at nearly 39% of a very small sample of 18 haplotypes. Oppenheimer, 2006, page 232, seized upon this evidence to advance a theory of a Bronze Age Spanish mining colony in North Wales at Abergele based upon the discovery in 1997. All right. So, in summary, I'll read this top one. EV13 as calculated has placed the expansion of this haplogroup from the Balkan Peninsula into the remainder of Europe no earlier than 5.3 KYA. If correct, E3B1A2 could not have been involved in Neolithic settlement of Britain. Yeah, because that's the eyes, the haplogroup eyes were doing that in Neolithic times. Another difficulty with the Neolithic, Bronze Age, and Iron Age scenarios for E3B and J is the almost complete absence of those haplogroups from Ireland, suggesting that they arrived as part of a migration that did not itself have any significant impact on Ireland's Y DNA admixture. One such large-scale migration is known from history: the Roman occupation, which never reached Ireland in the form of permanent settlements. All right, getting into the end, y'all. Thank you for all that has stayed this long to see the genetics. I appreciate the love. Hopefully you've liked this content. Um, yeah, just please like, share, and subscribe. If you're new to this channel, thank you. Leave feedback. Let me know how you like this content. Let me know what I should improve on. That's the main thing. I'm always looking on ways to improve, so just let me know. I love good feedback. For this one, excavating Y chromosome haplotype strata in Anatolia, the major components haplogroups E3B, G, J, I, L, N, K2, and R1, 94.1%, are shared with European and neighboring Near Eastern populations, in contrast with only a minor share of haplogroups related to Central Asia, C, Q, and O, 3.4%. Indian 5 or H, R2, 1.5%, and African A, E3 asterisk, E3A, 1%. Affinity. I'm going to just go through this one real quick. Alright, haplogroup E3B-N35 occurs at an overall 10.7% frequency, with EM78 and EM123 accounting for all E representatives except a single EM81 chromosome. Although EM78 and EM123 occur at similar frequencies, 5% and 5.5% respectively, their associated mean STR variances are significantly different. Alright, I have this highlighted, but it's just something that, just proves that, haplogroup J1, the Cohen and the Arab model haplotype. I mean, oh man, but other people still try to say, oh no, it's not the case. But majority of people with the last name Cohen usually carries that haplotype, the JP 58. All right. Haplogroup E3B in Neolithic expansions. While both EM78 and EM123 occur at similar frequency in Turkey, the variance of the former is considerably lower than the later, suggesting either temporal or effective population size differences. The prevalence of haplogroup E excluded M2 chromosomes in northern Egypt may reflect the source of non-African E3B lineages. EM78 haplotypes typify European lineages, Semno unpublished, and have expansion dates consistent with expansion of agriculturalists. However, the absence of E3B lineages in India supports the inference that the higher variance and older expansion dates for EM123 in Turkey do not reflect an earlier dispersal, but rather multiple founders with more associated diversity. So I found that's interesting. During the Bronze Age, the population of Anatolia expanded, reaching an estimated level of 12 million during the late Roman period. Russell, 1953. Alright, that's the end. Alright, so here's the deal on this one. So these are the subclades, and this is written by Raf Surstermans. He's the project manager on Family Tree DNA for the haplogroup EV13, Balkans. So he wrote this: Argonauts of the West Balkans, origins, spread, and distribution of haplogroup EV13. And I'm sure, some data has updated since then, because, more people obviously have tested their Y chromosome. Alright. But I want to show how Druze, so one of the most remarkable aspects of A8612 is its presence in 2 Druze samples. From older scientific studies, it is known that Druze, a distinct religious group living mainly in Lebanon, Syria, and Kurdistan, had moderate levels of V13. Because of the lack of testing of Druze, it is hard to understand why they have V13. The two A8612 are the only known Druze that have tested, and it's not clear whether this is a coincidence or A8612 really is dominant within the V13 Druze. In any case, this is not due to a recent founder effect, as the two Druze are on very separated lines. One of them is in fact closer to an English sample than to the other. The English and the Druze both belong to the group Z40644, where they form the subgroup BY5169. Also, you can see a German right there. Go to the other Druze. I think that was okay. That's it. So Germany. All right. So from L618 to V13. So L618 is like the founding father of V13. All right, there are 7 proven L618 asterisk samples known at this moment. They originate from Sardinia, Bari, southern Italy, Latvia, Denmark, England, Brittany, and Germany. So I've seen one I think it originates in Scandinavia also. So I guess that's the Denmark. But it's just crazy to think about that. All right, so V13 asterisk is relatively scarce, but is present in almost all of Europe. Since it's not tested in scientific studies with random selection, it suffers from severe selection bias towards Anglo-Saxon samples. That makes it all the more surprising that on the British Isles, it's only present in 1 Scottish, 1 Irish, and 3 English samples. The Irish sample is closely connected to a Macedonian sample, probably sharing a common ancestor about 2,200 years ago, which strongly suggests that the Irish sample descends from a Thracian soldier stationed in Britain, and that Thracian would have been serving in the Roman Empire. Apart from these 5 British, there are some other Western European V13s, 1 Danish, 1 Spanish, 1 Belgian, 1 Luxembourgish, 1 Dutch, 9 Germans, 9 Germans, yo, 8 Italian from near Rome, Genoa to Mafalda, Molsea, Milan, Naples, and Salerno, and 2 Swiss. All right. So this is the 2 Germans belongs to this one. You see the connections they have: Poles, Swiss, 2 Italians, so 2 Englishmen. All right. So these people that test positive for this SMP, mostly in Eastern Germany. All right, this seems to imply a medieval expansion that can either be linked to Slavic expansion in the early Middle Ages, 500 to 1000 AD, or colonization by Germans in the High Middle Ages, 1500 to 1500 AD. All right, read this one already. I think that's it. All right, so this one, there is a German-Dutch family in this group descending from a common ancestor in the late Middle Ages, but most members come from Wales or the rest of the British Isles, descending from a common ancestor around 400 BC. That's crazy. This probably connects it to a scientific study that was conducted in 2011 found that one unexpected haplogroup made up 30% of a study of 500 people in northeastern Wales. So, or they descended from the Roman soldiers, but do we not yet find relatives in Lily and Balkans? Yeah. Okay. Germany again. German. Hispanic. Okay. So one marker, and what's funny about this one, so this is the subclade that I'm down underneath. At least one of the Iberian samples at family tree DNA is Sephardic Jewish Spanish. I have one that's 100% confirmed Ashkenazi Jew. And he has, so when you get confirmed by family tree DNA, they actually give you a badge to show that, you know, you're Ashkenazi Jew or you're Sephardic Jew or you're Kohanim. So the Sephardic Jew is related to 2 Germans, 3 Italians. Before EV13 asterisk was found in the Balkans, it seemed that the distribution closely matched that of some R1b branches and that it was spread alongside them. You see what I'm saying? Look at this. That's very important to know because the Philistines had R1b. So EV13's just been around all the other haplogroups. I'm just saying, like, EV13 has been around R1Bs, J2s, a few J1s, G's. I think it's G2. There was even one found in Spain in a cave with J2. I think a E1B1A was alongside the EV13 also. Let me see German again. There are also quite some L241 plus samples in Central and Eastern Europe. This seems partly connected to a group of Ashkenazi Jews that are L241. I wonder if I'm related to one of those. A Sephardic Jew also has L241. So interesting. Because this is the subclade I'm down underneath, so in the late Roman period, it was destroyed by several earthquakes and abandoned. It's talking about Libyan city. Was it Greek city of Cyrene? Okay. Of course, lots of big Greek cities had Jewish communities, so this might be a coincidence. The Greek colony nearest to Bari was Taranto, established by Spartans. Bam! The Greek colony nearest to Bari was Taranto, established by the Spartans. But given the proximity to Albania, the L241 there might not come from Greece at all. Nevertheless, the pattern of distribution seems a good fit for Greek colonization. Very tentatively, a connection to Dorian-speaking Greeks could be suggested. Bam! Yes, sir. All right, as you see, just the EV13 just spread everywhere. Two Germans and an Anglo-Saxon, two Hispanics, Irishmen, Greeks, Southern Peloponnese. And EV13 dominates in Southern Peloponnese also. So I don't know where the Spartans exactly went to, if they left the island or they stood there, but Peloponnese is definitely dominated by EV13. As you can see, Germans. At least some of these 4 might be Ashkenazis from Ukraine. It's crazy. All right. Just show. All right. So it's found in Danish also. Dane again, Scandinavian. According to Anthony, Indo-European migrations marked by the Carolingians and Tamale or burial mounds arrived at the mounds of the Danube around about 3100 BC. They belong to the so-called Yamnaya culture that existed on the Pontic steppe and that is generally seen as the source for most, if not all, European languages. In the following 300 years, they spread upstream through the Danube Valley, settling in Romania, Serbia, and Hungary. So remember, so R1B is part of the Yamnaya culture, but EV13 has been close together with R1B. So they would have, that's a possibility of them spreading with each other, and they would just met each other on the Danube and just started, becoming neighbors with each other. All right, y'all. Well, that's the end of my presentation. My hypothesis is that the Danu are the so-called tribe of Dan, the mythical tribe of Dan. There's primary sources that prove they were in Egypt as slaves. There's primary sources they did settle in the Levant. There's primary sources that they did go up amongst the Greeks. And as far as haplogroups, I mean, I'm not saying all EV13 obviously was part of that, but I would say there was a few EV13s, maybe some R1Bs because of the Philistines. I mean, I don't know exactly how much R1B was amongst the Sea peoples. Maybe I1s, maybe a G2, but for the most part, I believe that they were EV13. So that's my conclusions to it. Please let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. Biblical DNA here. I'm out.